In the year 61 AD, the Roman Empire ruled with an iron fist. Their legions swept across the land, crushing resistance with brutal efficiency. But in the distant corners of Britain, a storm was brewing, one that will shake the very foundations of Roman power. Her name was Boudica, a queen, a mother, and a warrior whose fury will ignite a rebellion that will challenge the might of Rome itself. This is the story of the Battle of Watling Street. The Romans came to Britain in 43 AD, an unstoppable force of discipline and strength. Among the conquered tribes, the Iceni were allowed to remain semi-independent, their king, Prasutagus, keeping peace with the Roman by sharing his wealth. But when King Prasutagus died in 60 AD, the Romans saw an opportunity. They seized his wealth. They humiliated his daughters, and they crushed the will of his people. It was a betrayal that will awaken a fury unlike any before. Boudica, his widow, will not stand by. She will rise, and she will lead her people into the fires of rebellion. Boudica was not just a queen. She was a symbol of defiance, fierce, relentless, and driven by a thirst for revenge. With fire in her heart, she united the fractured tribes of Britain, Iceni, Trinovantes, and more against the Roman invaders. Her army swelled. Hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children bound together by a single cause: freedom from the Roman yoke. But the Romans had their own leader, General Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, a seasoned commander, cold and methodical. With just 10,000 men, he will face an overwhelming force. The fate of Britain will be decided on the field of battle. The stage was set. Watling Street, an ancient Roman road, will become the blood-soaked ground where fate will be decided. Boudica's army charged. The roar of her warriors filled the air as they surged forward. But the Romans were ready. Their lines were tight, their shields raised high. Roman discipline, forged in countless battles, stood against the fury of the rebels. The rebels, fueled by rage, rushed headlong, but without the precision of the Roman legions. At first, it seemed like Boudica's army might overwhelm them, but the Romans held firm. With deadly archers, cavalry, and their impenetrable shields, they countered the rebel onslaught. The battle raged on, brutal and unforgiving. And then came the turning point. The rebels faltered. Roman precision sliced through them. The momentum of the revolt shattered. By the end, the battlefield was strewn with the bodies of the fallen. The Romans had won. But at what cost? The Battle of Watling Street was a massacre. Over 80,000 rebels were slain. The rebellion was crushed. But Boudica's name, her legacy, will never be forgotten. For in that defeat, something greater was born: the spirit of resistance against the might of Rome. The flame Boudica ignited will burn through history. As for Boudica, her fate is lost to time. Some say she died in battle. Others say she took her own life to escape the Roman vengeance. But in the heart of her people, she will never truly die. Her legend grew, inspiring future generations to rise against tyranny. Though the Romans will maintain their grip on Britain, they could never erase the memory of the woman who dared to fight for her people. Boudica the queen who stood against Rome would live forever in the shadows of history. In the late 17th century, an empire that stretched across 3 continents stood at its peak. The Ottoman Empire had conquered kingdoms, broken armies, and pushed deep into Europe itself. Now, only one city stood in its way: Vienna. If it fell, the road into the heart of Europe would lay wide open. This is the story of the siege that changed history, the Battle of Vienna. By the 1600s, the Ottoman Empire was one of the most powerful states on earth. Its armies ruled the Balkans, controlled Hungary, and stood face to face with the Habsburg Empire. Vienna was more than a city, it was a gateway. Whoever held Vienna controlled Central Europe. The Ottomans had failed to take it once before, in 1529, but in 1683 they returned with an army unlike anything Europe had seen. At its head stood Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha, a man chasing immortality through conquest. Inside Vienna, fear ruled the streets. Emperor Leopold I had fled. The city's fate now rested on just 15,000 defenders. Their leader, Count Ernst Rutger von Strahlenberg, knew the truth. If help did not arrive, Vienna would fall. Far to the north, an alliance was forming, and among them rode a man feared across battlefields, King John III Sobieski of Poland, a cavalry commander without equal. The siege began in July. Ottoman cannons roared day and night. The earth shook beneath Vienna's walls. Beneath the city, Ottoman sappers dug tunnels, planting explosives under the defenses. Inside the city, starvation spread. Disease followed. Every day, the walls grew weaker. Every night, defenders prayed for dawn. By September, Vienna was seconds from collapse. On September 12, 1683, help finally arrived. 70,000 soldiers crested on the hills of Kallenberg. Poles, Austrians, German allies. Kara Mustafa did not see the danger. At dawn, the attack began. Infantry clashed, cannons thundered. The Ottoman lines began to bend. Then, in the late afternoon, Sobieski gave the order. 3,000 winged hussars charged downhill. Steel, horses, thunder. It was the largest cavalry charge in history. The Ottoman army shattered. By nightfall, the siege was over. Vienna still stood. The Battle of Vienna changed everything. Ottoman expansion into Europe was stopped for good. For the first time in centuries, the empire was forced into the defensive. The balance of power had shifted. Kara Mustafa fled, but failure had a price. He was executed on the Sultan's orders. In the years that followed, the Ottomans lost Hungary, then the Balkans. The empire survived, but its decline had begun. By the winter of 1941, East Asia was burning. Japanese armies had marched across China for 4 brutal years, city after city fallen, resistance crushed. Or so it seemed. But in the heart of China, one city refused to surrender: Changsha. And in the late 1941, Japan will try to take it one last time. The Second Sino-Japanese War had begun in 1937. Japan sought a quick victory, seizing key cities, shattering morale, forcing China to surrender. Changsha stood directly in their path, a vital transportation hub, a gateway to southern China, and beyond it, the wartime capital, Chongqing. Japan had already attacked Changsha twice, in 1939 and again in 1941. Both times they failed. Now, as Japanese bombs fell on Pearl Harbor, another offensive was launched. Changsha will fall, but the cost will be paid in blood. Defending Changsha was General Su Yu, one of China's most skilled commanders, calm, methodical, deadly when patient. Su Yu did not believe in heroic last stands. He believed in preparation, deception, and timing. Facing him was Japan's 11th Army, led by General Anami Korechika. Veteran troops, overwhelming firepower, and absolute confidence in victory. In December 1941, Japanese forces surged forward, crossing rivers, forcing breakthroughs, pressing towards Changsha. And then, the Chinese disappeared. Positions were abandoned, roads left open. To Japanese commanders, it looked like collapse. But it wasn't retreat, it was a trap. As Japanese troops advanced deeper, Chinese forces struck from the shadows. Ambushes, night raids, constant harassment. Supply lines stretched thin. Food ran out. Ammunition dwindled. The terrain turned against them. By January 1942, Japanese units reached Changsha's outskirts, exhausted, isolated, and surrounded. That was the moment Su Yu had waited for. Chinese forces struck from every direction. The trap snapped shut. Encircled, outnumbered, the Japanese line collapsed. The Third Battle of Changsha was one of China's greatest victories of the war. It was the first major Allied land victory after Pearl Harbor, and it proved something the world needed to hear. Japan could be beaten. Changsha will one day fall, but not in 1941. 3 times Japan tried to take the city. 3 times they failed. In the late medieval world, no force inspired more fear than the Mongol Empire. They erased cities from maps, shattered armies in days, and carved an empire that stretched across continents. But in 1288, on a river a few outsiders had ever heard of, their advance came to an end. At the center of Mongol power stood Kublai Khan, heir to Genghis Khan's legacy and ruler of China's Yuan dynasty. From his capital, Kublai Khan sought to dominate the southern frontier. There, beyond China's borders, stood a kingdom of Tai Viet. 2 invasions had already failed. 2 humiliations the Mongols had not forgotten. In 1287, Kublai Khan ordered one final campaign. Commanding Dai Viet's defenses was Tran Hung Dao, a general forged through years of invasion and survival. He knew his enemy well. He also knew his limitations. Against Mongol cavalry and fleets, direct confrontation meant defeat. The Bagdan River followed a strict rhythm, its waters rising, and falling with the pull of the tide. Below the surface, Vietnamese laborers drove wooden stakes into the riverbed, each one sharpened, reinforced with iron, and carefully concealed. At high tide, the trap was invincible. At low tide, it was inescapable. Vietnamese vessels struck quickly, then fell back, retreating deeper into the river's channels. The Mongol fleet followed. Rows of ships pressed forward. The river seemed open. The pursuit seemed safe. Then, the tide began to turn. Water levels dropped. Ships slowed. Keels struck hidden wood. Iron spikes tore through holes. The Mongol fleet could no longer move. That was the signal. Vietnamese warships surged back into the river. Arrows rained down. Fire ships slammed into the stranded vessels. Trapped by the river, pinned by stakes, the Mongol fleet was destroyed. The Battle of Bac Dan River marked a turning point. It ended Mongol expansion into Southeast Asia. Kublai Khan never launched another invasion. Dai Viet remained independent. A global empire had been stopped by local knowledge. Not through strength alone, not through numbers, but through timing, discipline, and the patience to wait for the tide. In the year 105 BC, Rome believed itself invincible. It had crushed Carthage, conquered Greece, bent kings and nations to its will. But on a quiet plain in southern Gaul, near a river called the Rhone, Rome walked straight into one of the greatest disasters in its history. This was not a battle lost by courage. It was a battle lost by pride. This was the Battle of Arausio. For years, something was moving across Europe. Entire peoples, the Cimbri and the Teutons. Not just armies, but families, wagons, children, warriors. No one knows exactly why they migrated. Famine, climate, desperation, only that they moved south, and nothing seemed able to stop them. Roman armies met them before, and Rome lost. By 105 BC, the tribes stood in southern Gaul, one step away from Italy itself. Rome could no longer look away. To stop the threat, Rome sent two armies, and two men who hated each other. Quintus Servilius Scipio, a proud aristocrat commanding one force, and Gnaeus Mallius Maximus, the sitting consul, leading another. Scipio refused to recognize Mallius' authority, so the Roman armies camped apart, divided by the Rhone, divided by ego. As the enemy gathered nearby, Rome argued with itself. Then, everything fell apart. Ignoring orders, ignoring reason, Scipio attacked alone. The Cimbri answered immediately. His army was shattered, formations collapsed, men fled in terror, straight towards the second Roman camp. Moments later, the full force of the migrating tribe struck again. This time, there was nowhere to run. Roman discipline dissolved, command vanished, the battlefield became a slaughterhouse. Thousands were driven into the Rhone, armor dragged them under, men drowned screaming. Ancient writers say tens of thousands died. The river they claimed ran red with blood. Rome had not suffered a defeat like this since Cannae. And now the road to Italy lay open. News of Arausio struck Rome like a thunderbolt. Fear spread through the Republic. The old system had failed. This defeat was not just military, it was political and existential. Rome realized something terrifying. It could destroy itself without the enemy lifting a sword. From the ashes of Arausio rose Caius Marius. Rome remade its army, professional soldiers, iron discipline, unity of command. And years later, Rome will destroy the Cimbri and Teutons. But Arausio was never forgotten. He remains a warning carved into history that pride can kill empires faster than any enemy.